It's not easily measured, right? So it doesn't meet that measurement criteria, and it's not objective at all, really. Somebody might find you attractive, you might find yourself attractive, somebody else might not find you attractive, you might not find yourself attractive. You could wake up one morning and just think you look like crap. It's not really a great thing to look at when you're talking about whether or not a fitness program works. Oh, that's really good, Coco. This is going to be a video that's going to be part of a series that I want to make about kind of taking a skeptical approach to fitness. I feel like, and I think a lot of fitness enthusiasts and trainers will agree with me on this, people have a tendency to kind of shoot in the dark and hope for results when it comes to their training. And being a skeptical person and being scientifically minded, that is something I'm tired of seeing. I like to summarize this as a little acronym which I came up with, which is BASHACT, BASHACT. So that's baseline and assessment, stimulus and hypothesis, and then analysis, conclusions, and takeaways. We'll start with BA. So that's baseline and assessment. Whenever you start a fitness program, this is whether you're doing it on your own, you're doing it with a trainer, you're doing it as part of, CrossFit or some other kind of organized group program where you have some attention from a trainer or a coach. That is really good. You need to establish some kind of a baseline. So a good baseline is specific. It's objective, although I'll talk more about that in a little bit, because it doesn't necessarily have to be really objective. It just has to be something that you can track. It needs to be something you can easily measure, and it needs to be pertinent to your training, to your fitness. So what do I mean by an objective measure? An objective measure could be something that you can, easily put down in numbers. So how fast do you run a mile? That's an objective measure. And it relates to your fitness. Your resting heart rate, right? It's a measure of cardiovascular fitness. Your time to fatigue on, a certain amount of watts on your bike. It could be how much can you deadlift with good form? So that's a measure of strength, right? It could be something that's sort of more related to like everyday activity. How long does it take you to go up the stairs, right? It could be, can you or can you not execute a certain move? So a lot of people are trying to get their first pull-up. Can you or can you not do a pull-up, right? So that's a baseline, okay? Now, this also could be any number of things, range of motion, waist to height. All of these things relate to your fitness, okay? They relate to your fitness. They're not perfectly correlated with your fitness. There are other factors at play, but these are things you can change by training, okay? So it's not, there are measures that people typically think of as related to their fitness that I don't like. So one of them is, just as an example, how attractive am I? People think that has to do with their fitness, and it does have to do with your fitness. Obviously, if you train, you can get more attractive, but it's not easily measured, right? So it doesn't meet that measurement criteria, and it's not objective at all, really. Somebody might find you attractive, you might find yourself attractive, somebody else might not find you attractive, you might not find yourself attractive. You could wake up one morning and just think you look like crap. It's not really a great thing to look at when you're talking about whether or not a fitness program works. Although a lot of fitness programs will promise you that they'll make you more attractive. So just keep that in mind. But you can take something that is kind of subjective and you can make it objective, and there are different ways to do this. So one of them that I really like is RPE, rate of perceived exertion. You may have heard of this, you may not have heard of this, but rate of perceived exertion is a measurement that physios and trainers all use. Not all of us, obviously, but a lot of us like it. It's basically that you're measuring how much effort it takes you to do something. I'm a really big fan of this because it gives you do have some access, in terms of how hard something feels, to stuff that correlates pretty well with physiology, and actually trained athletes, and I might do a separate video about this, can gauge their heart rate really well based on their rate of perceived exertion. So you can do this on a scale of 1 to 10. You could do this, where 1 is, let's say, no effort and 10 is a lot of effort. And if that starts to drop, that's a way to do it. It's really good to sort of measure how easy or hard something is, which is subjective, but it correlates well with the training. So even if you don't necessarily lift in absolute terms more weight, you might see that after 6 weeks, a task that's related to that feels easier, right? Although you probably should see the weight go up, at least eventually. So that is your baseline and assessment, okay? So it's some kind of place for you to start from. When I say assessment, that also means, okay, based on this baseline, what should I train? So if I'm trying to improve a certain characteristic, let's say if I go to the doctor, I found out my resting heart rate is 90, right? It's like near the upper end, and I kind of want to bring that down. So either I need to do the research or talk to somebody who has done the relevant research and has the relevant training. So this could be your trainer, your coach, this could be your doctor, although not all doctors have training in exercise. Most of them don't, unfortunately. So you do that and you say, okay, what training method works for me that I could then use to bring that number down, okay? And this is something I do with all my clients, and this is something you can even do by yourself, because this information is really, a lot of it's out there in peer-reviewed journals, on PubMed. Please use PubMed. It's wonderful. I love PubMed. That is really good. So you take your baseline, okay? And then we've got our second component. Our second component is our stimulus and hypothesis. So when I say stimulus, this is a training stimulus. And hypothesis, this has to be something testable. So once we've got our baseline, we say, all right, we want to see a change. So if we're talking about, let's say, lifting, I want to be able to lift more weight. I want to be able to squat 20 kilos more or something like that. Or let's be more modest, 5 kilos more, right? Good, okay, cool. That's a measurable change, right? So that's something I can turn into a hypothesis. And let's say I don't always have access to a gym. Okay, so I don't always have access to a heavy gym, but I know that I can do single leg squat work at home, right? So stuff on one leg. I can just go okay, I'm going to train the single leg squat twice a week for 6 weeks, and I'm going to see if that improves my low bar barbell squat, right? It's very important when you set up your stimulus and hypothesis that it's not completely non-specific. So you don't want to say this training will have some effect. That's done sometimes in studies. It's not a great way to set up your training hypothesis. And the reason for that is, at the end of the day, you want to be constantly dialing in better and better and better protocols for you. Okay, you're an N of 1, you're a sample size of 1, and whatever you do is going to be sensitive for you. Okay, we start with the evidence. When we say that something's evidence-based, you start with the evidence, but at the end of the day, you want to tailor it to yourself. So, for example, I can run a test where I say I'm going to work on, sprinting, let's say, sprinting to fatigue, like fatigue sprints, for 12 weeks. So that's 2 training cycles in terms of strength training, because sprinting does have a little bit of a strength component, but it also, cardiovascular stuff is usually a little shorter. So let's say that's 4 training cycles. It's a fair amount of stimulus. And I'm going to see how that improves my 5K time. Okay. So that's a good one, because I've picked something that I can easily measure, my 5K time. And I've picked a stimulus I can readily track, which is doing the sprint training. You want it to be somehow related. Sprinting is not going to improve my grip strength. That's basically what I'm trying to say. A bad hypothesis might be something like, I'm going to start running 3 times a week, and that's going to make me feel good. Whether or not you feel good, quote unquote, that's kind of all over the place. And yes, fitness absolutely correlates with mood. And as you train, you might find that your mood improves, and, your sensitivity to pain can change and things like that. But at the end of the day, we don't want something that's really dependent on a whole bunch of factors. I could make that one a little bit better by saying something like, I'm going to run, 2 or 3 times a week. And on a scale of 1 to 10, I want to see my average mood over the week improve by 2 points on a scale of 1 to 10, right? That could be better, but something that would probably be maybe a better hypothesis is something like, I'm going to run 2 to 3 times a week, and I'm not going to change anything else essentially, and I'm going to lose an inch off of my waist in 3 months, right? Something like that. It's a very modest effect, but it is testable. And yeah, so that's a good one to do. Or I might do that the rate of perceived exertion, the RPE for me going up the stairs drops. So it becomes easier for me to do. You know, if it started out as like somewhere in the middle of my scale and it felt kind of medium hard, it gets easy. And at the end of your training cycle, okay, and you can literally just set it. I do this all the time. I'll like set a date on my calendar for myself or a client, and we'll be like, okay, we've done 6 weeks of training, or I've done 6 weeks of training. What happened, right? What happened? And we have to have a baseline, and then we have to see what happened. That's the real difference. Ideally, you want to measure under the same conditions if you can. And yeah, that's your analysis, your conclusions, and your takeaway. So you're going to figure out what changed. Did this change really have to do with my training or something else? And then the takeaway is something like, am I going to keep incorporating this into my training, or am I going to modify this and try to run another experiment? I think it's really, really important to do the takeaways part and then turn it into some kind of easily implemented heuristic. Yeah, and then you can rerun your trial, essentially. That's it. Cheers. Have a good day.